He was the most distinguished man I've ever met. His intellectualism was beyond anything that I could describe. His vocabulary was beyond anything I could describe. And he just said, well, get on the table. I'll see what I can do for him. And then I started asking questions because immediately when he put his hands on me, I could feel this flow of energy through my body. And I was very enamored of what he did because for the first time in years, I had total 100% pain relief.
Wow.
It was beyond amazing.
Welcome to the Light Warrior Podcast. This episode is brought to you by Juemin Music, the very highest quality bass guitars, amps, and cabs with brands like Ampeg, Bergantino, Blackstar, Gansler Amplification, and Dingwall. To check out all the cool stuff they carry, go to showmemusic.com, SHOME music.com. My guest on this episode is Michael Lomax. Michael is a Qigong, Neigong, and clinical Qigong teacher and author of the book A Light Warrior's Guide to High-Level Energy Healing. He is also author of several Qigong movement DVDs and has students from all over the world. He teaches workshops that are announced on his website, QigongAmerica.com, and will be presenting at the National Qigong Conference in Asheville, North Carolina for 2018. Michael has practiced the energy arts of Qigong and Neigong for over 45 years and is really the catalyst for this podcast. I have been a student of Michael's for about 6 years. I've been going out to his workshops whenever I can make it out, a couple of times a year, and I have found his Qigong practice and his energy healing techniques to be extremely powerful and life-changing. And this has been the case not only for me, but for the other students that I've met. As I've gotten to know some of Michael's students a little bit better and have got a chance to have some conversations with them during these workshops, I have come to realize that this is a collection of very fascinating people from all over the world. There are always fascinating conversations taking place, ranging from topics like Taoism, energy healing, body work, acupuncture, Chinese medicine, life after death, reincarnation, shamanism, the nature of consciousness, martial arts, psychedelics, all sorts of really, really cool topics that you don't get to talk about with people too much in your everyday life. I'm really looking forward to having some of these folks on the podcast in the future to talk about all these awesome topics. But for now, let's talk to the person that kind of brought everyone together. This is my conversation with Michael Lomax. Welcome to the show, Michael. Glad we were able to connect. You are talking to me from Missouri. Surprised you have internet out there already.
Yes, we're in the backwoods here in Missouri, and I'm holding up a satellite dish with one hand and pointing it to try to catch those waves there. Well, I got a
balancing on one leg,
a little can that's to my ear. So we got the high tech here.
Nice, yeah, that's the way to do it. Well, very cool. Hope the signal holds up and everything goes smoothly. So great to talk to you. Last time I saw you was not that long ago. We had a really, really awesome Qigong workshop in Estes Park, Colorado, back in, October?
Yes, that was an amazing place to do Qigong at 9,200 feet. Mm-hmm. So we had the energies of the Twin Mountains there. And it was just beyond expectation. I knew it was going to be good, but it was really highly energetic. And I felt like we all just really gained a lot with our practice there.
Yeah, absolutely. it's definitely a different kind of energy up there. One thing I noticed, and I think that happened to a lot of other people, is trouble sleeping. Like, even though we're doing, a lot of physical and high energetic stuff all day, normally you should be wiped out, but something about those mountains, you're just wired. Like, I had to just dose myself with melatonin every night just so I could go to sleep.
Yeah, it has to do with the vibratory rate of the energetics, the chi at those elevations, and especially at this place, because this is actually a sacred area. Mm-hmm. And the mountain chi there is just such high vibration that it's just vibrating every cell in your body, going zzz, and it is difficult. I think that one can get used to it and sleep better, but for all of us flatlanders piling up there into the mountains at that elevation, all of a sudden, I think for all of us, we were feeling it very strongly all through the night. Yeah. The amazing thing that I found, that I had plenty of energy the next day, even if I only slept 3 hours.
Yeah.
So that was good.
Yeah. I guess that's the reason why, the sages of old would retreat into the mountains. I guess part of it is to be away from the noise and pollution of civilization, but also probably to have access to that kind of chi.
That is true. I have found through the years that anytime I need to clear myself or just really get high with the light, I would make a trip to the mountains. And it's always been rewarding to do so. And I feel like maybe this is a place that we can, as a group, can revisit because of this very topic.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was good for me. I remember you were kind of trying to poll a few of your students if we should have the workshop there or in what's the other spot on the East Coast?
Well, we've done them in Hilton Head Island.
Hilton Head Island, yeah, that's it.
There.
Which is also a beautiful spot, but I'm always having to fly out because I live in California and I have to always fly out to the Midwest or to the East Coast, and this was actually the shortest trip for me this time, so I was all for that.
There were 3 or 4 people there, I think, from the West Coast, so it definitely worked better. For me, I drove 12 hours. So
wow.
It's about the same, actually, a little bit closer to Colorado than it is to the East Coast. So I can do either.
Yeah. But, we had some heroes there. Some people came from Australia. A guy came from Australia. A few people came from Austria. Some people had some really, really intense travel to get out there. Pretty impressive.
Yeah. Yes, they did. And it was very impressed. And I feel blessed that we have such dedicated people in our group. And it was amazing to have them there. I always like to have it just adds a cultural aspect of vibration. Mm-hmm. We look at everything in terms of vibration, right? Since we do Qigong, but it adds that when you mix people from all over, it just like adds to the full spectrum of the vibration that we are all experiencing. So in addition to the cultural aspect, which is always nice. Hey, I like to hear the Australian guys talk, right? Mm-hmm. So in addition to that, we have the vibration aspect going on, and that's enhancing to all of us.
Yeah, I agree. So I guess let's talk about how you got into this in the first place. It was very strange for me and probably a lot of other students to, and some who have been seeking some kind of a self-actualization energy practice much longer than I to, kind of get past all the, your Chinese masters and your robe Taoist monk types and kind of land on you, who's just kind of, at least on the surface, like a regular American, beer drinking Joe kind of guy. So what led you into what is kind of fairly an esoteric art?
Well, we all have a destiny, I believe. And, I think there's no denying your destiny, that one will create situations, events that leads them to find that which they need to find in life. And if one simply follows that, we all end up exactly where we need to be. I felt that very strongly early on. I had questions as a child that could not be answered by my parents and peers, and felt the seeking prompt very early on in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, of course, when we get out of our parents' house and into our own environment as young adults, we all start, quote, finding ourselves much more than when we're teenagers. And I think for me, growing up the way I did in the country, I had plenty of time to spend in nature. And this early on experience of harmony with nature very much helped my seeking pathway of finding the energetics. So I think that was very beneficial in leading me to that which I needed to find.
Okay. And did you see some kind of a juxtaposition, like if you were to travel to a big city or something, something that's more hectic and more kind of high-speed civilized, you would feel the difference in energy?
Yes, absolutely. Even as a child, I actually never could understand cities. Living in the country is just a different thing than growing up. And now that in my life I have actually lived in some cities, I understand what the difference is. When you become attuned to nature, then a lot of what comes in as a signal, so to speak, to you is like, that's not harmonious.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really easy. I can go to a city now, but man, after about 2 weeks, I just don't like it at all. I pick up on all the thought forms and all the extraneous noise garbage that, to people who get attuned to that and adjusted to it, I think that they're able to tune it out better than I can. Even though I've mastered a certain amount of energetics, doesn't mean I'm not sensitive to all that. So for me, it's much better being able to get away from that so that I can practice the harmonies, the harmonics of nature. It's a matter of shielding from it and then getting used to it. And I can see that, well, you live in a city, so it's a matter of getting used to it.
Yeah, and I can definitely always feel the difference when I am somewhere peaceful in the country. I've been, born in the city, kind of lived most of my life in fairly urban environments, so I've never spent that much time. But yeah, I can certainly. Like you said, you get used to it, but a lot of times it's not a good kind of, for what we do, it's not that good, because you get used to it by essentially numbing yourself out in a lot of ways and shutting off a lot of the inputs that are then much more difficult to open when you're trying to do some kind of a practice. You have to shed a lot of layers of noise just to kind of center yourself.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, that one does become a little bit numb to it because you're constantly bombarded with it. And if you kept open to it, it would kind of drive a person nuts.
Yeah.
And that's also why I think we see a lot of hecticness in people's lives. They don't know how to really adjust to all this extraneous noise. We've got radio waves bombarding us us all the time. We live around our Wi-Fi, all sorts of signals. I mean, if we actually look at the totality of signals bombarding us and considered it as pollution, we would freak out because it's bombarding us every day. So in an environment like we were in the mountains, where less people, less of the electromagnetic noise, it's much easier to attune to what I call that which is real. And I think for people in the city, that live in cities, they do have to overcome that numbing out, so to speak, as you put it, in order to really just reach out there and, hey, I can grab the chi. It's right there. Oh, wow. Okay, yeah, here it is. Mm-hmm. Because they have tried to filter that part of reaching out. So I admire people. I have some friends that are words that may be used to describe them would be city shaman mm-hmm. type people, and I admire that because I'm not sure I could do it.
Right. It's to me, I think of that as sort of like an athlete who's training at altitude, like when like UFC fighters or something that got a bout coming up, they'll go and train at altitude for a few weeks. So then when you go back to sea level, you're that much stronger. So that's kind of a similar thing, I think.
Yeah, quite possibly.
Okay, so aside from you did kind of have a natural sense of energies and the sense of what's natural and what's balanced and harmonious and what isn't. At what point did that kind of take you into the direction of an actual practice? Of how did it start? Well, I guess you were kind of coming of age in the 60s. The whole counterculture psychedelics movement. Did that play a role in your development?
Oh, absolutely not. No, I'm lying.
I didn't
sure
inhale.
And I don't see how a person could be exposed to that type of awakening culture and not be affected by it and see the positive aspects of it as well as the negative aspects of it. And sure, I felt like experiments with hallucinogenics did play a role in helping me transcend. But they also showed me what not to do as well. And I feel that, now I would not even care about doing such because it is harsh. It throws the spirit into realms that we're not prepared for. Mm-hmm. And if you do it the natural way, like the Taoist inner teachings teach, then you're step by step as you like walk up the stairs rather than taking a fast elevator to a place mm-hmm. that you're not ready to walk out of that elevator to, which I think is what the hallucinogenics do. But yeah, I was affected by that, and I felt like it played a role in my environment. Early on, when I was in college, I did start my seeking and found a Qigong practice way back then. And it was interesting that I don't know if I've told this to many people, but my path into finding Qigong was actually through exposure to some Rosicrucian teachings.
Really?
And I was not enamored. Yeah, I was not enamored of the totality of the spiritual teachings, but they had some exercises that are just right out copied or same as Qigong.
Wow.
And so I did some of those exercises, and I could feel the energetics very strongly. And I said, what is this? Okay, this is pretty cool stuff. So I researched it and found, that's what it was. It was Qigong. But I didn't know it at the time. I was just taught these were a few Rosicrucian exercises for enhancement of the spirit, they do that.
Any idea how those exercises made their way into Rosicrucian practice?
No, I have no clue other than that. What I have found by exposure to a lot of different things is that truth is truth, no matter where it comes from, and illusion is illusion, no matter where it comes from. It was just like when I was sitting on top of the mountain with a Cherokee medicine man, and he talked about the old men, how they taught methods of healing, and he was showing me a method of healing. He said, after we do this healing, we do this. And he proceeded to show me a Qigong exercise. And I laughed. He said, why are you laughing? I said, it's a small, small world.
Wow. So basically what it sounds like is that Native Americans and Qigong that came out of China, out of also very ancient Taoist shamanic practices, I assume, kind of come from the same source.
That's my belief and experience. Master Wang did tell a story once about long time ago, the shaman of the tribe told his people that we have to. He had a vision, and they had to leave. And he said the way will be closed off to us. And this is apparently the land bridge that we had, and does account for a lot of the similarities and of Native Americans. I think I haven't really researched the DNA thing, but I think there's a lot of the scholars that do feel that there's much in harmony with China, with the Native American cultures.
Right. Huh. That's very, very interesting. So,
I had a friend that's a medical anthropologist, and in fact, he had his papers online at one time. That he said the same thing. He had a master's in medical anthropology, and he said that all the evidence he could discern was that the Native American culture did have a commonality with ancient China culture. So I think that the shamanic practices, at least the ones I was exposed to, I didn't see any difference between that and the high-level Qigong practices. And I still don't see any differences.
Right.
You may have noticed that I use a drum.
Yeah.
And I just have a particular bent for that sort of thing. But energy can be manipulated in many, many ways. And sure, we have the cultural influences. The Native Americans did it one way, and the Chinese did it another way. Another quick story along that same lines is after I had spent some time in the Sacred Mountains with the Cherokee, I bought a medicine drum and took it to Master Wang as a gift. And I said, Master Wang, I have learned how to project energy down the sound waves of the drum. And so I demonstrated it, and I was so proud of myself because I was showing him something he didn't know about, right? Well, wrong. Wrong. He said, very good. Now let me show you how we do it.
Now, I just have one quick thought, and then I do want to dive into Master Wang and how you met and how you learned from him. I was just going to say that the cool thing I always thought about you integrating some of the Native American practices into Taoist and Qigong practices is that kind of another thing that makes this American, that it's not just you're kind of getting a culture from the Far East. It's still not necessarily Western English or immigrant America, but it's the actual, American native art that kind of lives here, and the spirit of it is here, and integrating that into the practices that we do here on American soil kind of has some kind of a poetic quality.
Well, yeah, to me, it's just simply taking the best of everything I've learned and integrating it together. As I said a little bit earlier, truth is truth and illusion is illusion. It doesn't matter where it comes from, right? Mm-hmm. So to me, the cultural aspect, I meet people that they're so into Native American that they get embodied into the culture. Well, it is a fascinating culture. And I have Native American friends, and I love them. But, just to become enamored with the culture simply because, Native Americans made just as many mistakes as any other culture. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. All of us, all of humanity has made mistake after mistake after mistake. The same thing with the Taoists, with the Chinese Taoists. I met people that they become so Taoist. Everything is so Taoist. Well, mm-hmm. It's Taoism. It was simply the methods I learned were simply a way to awaken oneself to their higher level aspect and to be able to manipulate the energetics from that higher level aspect rather than button heads with something right directly on. To solve any type of problem, we can't confront that problem head on. We have to change levels to confront that problem. Otherwise, we're just simply like two goats butting their heads together. Mm-hmm. So to rise above that level, and I talk in terms of vibratory rates, energy by vibration, we rise above that level so that we can actually solve a problem. In essence, that's what we do in our medical Qigong. So where it comes from is almost irrelevant to me, and I mean my way of thinking of it. It's where you get that matters. It's the place that you end up in your development, your personal development that matters. It doesn't matter where it comes from.
That's true. I mean, if you dig deep enough, pretty much any culture on earth will have some kind of a practice like this or something similar if you go far enough and deep enough.
Yes, and we can just take what works and put it into a system. And I think one of the problems, with Qigong, I hate to say it, but it is buyer beware if a person starts investigating it, because quite frankly, there's a lot of nonsense out there. And there's also a lot of good practices out there. Yeah. And so one has to wade through that to find what's real and what's not real and what works. And I think the thing that is ignored the most in this field of Qigong, especially here in the West, but also in China, is efficiency. Mm. Because to me, that makes, in other words, okay, if I'm going to spend X amount of time a day, why don't I do that in the most efficient manner possible? And that gets to our gift of the Tao movements. These were reverse engineered stillness movement patterns as seen from a higher level aspect. So their efficiency is way beyond what, if one just looks at the movement and see somebody doing it, they have no understanding of that efficiency. But the efficiency is very high in these movements. So they were developed to take advantage of one's time that they put into it.
Right. So what do you think is the main failing of other practitioners that aren't as efficient in their practices? Is it a matter of just not getting the right information, the right practices, focusing on the wrong things?
Well, it's a multi-layered subject, of course, and you speak to any Qigong guy, you're going to get a different opinion from the next Qigong guy. But from my perspective, it's a matter of, okay, let me put it this way. So a lot of Qigong books, you get an introductory books that talk about, well, this is a breath system. It's all about breath. So a lot of people learn it in that manner. And to their thinking, that's what it is. That's what Qi is. It's breath. It's air. Well, no, you delve a little deeper, and Qi is really its energy. It's the raw energy. So breath methods are simply a tool. Mm-hmm. But people get caught up in that breath. Then you got another school that will talk about movement. Oh, Qigong is about alignment. Mm-hmm. The body has to be aligned a certain way, and you have to do this and this and this, and they get all caught up in that. So I think it's these indulgences of getting caught up in the various thoughts of the overall totality of Qigong that is actually a hindrance, because to me and to the students I teach, we find that Qigong is a study of energy, just like it says, and it's all about the energetics. So rather than being concerned with the breath and being concerned with the exactness of alignment of movement, we're concerned with the energy itself. So I think bypassing the tools in terms of getting caught in the indulgence of the tool itself is one of the keys to a proper Qigong practice.
Mm. Okay. And I guess the people that help you kind of not get hung up on these things. Let's talk about your main teachers, Master Wang and Dr. Graef. Graef. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. Graef.
Dr. Graef. Yes.
Which one would you like to start with? I guess who did you meet first?
Well, I stayed with Dr. Graef first.
Okay.
I found Dr. Graef because of my own back problems. I had had several accidents in my life, and I kept hearing about this doctor who practiced this weird stuff that came from China. And, I heard about him for about maybe almost a year before I finally said, I was a bit cynical about medicine in general, because I had sought, virtually every type of known medicine that one could find in the West at the time, the chiropractic and neurologist and physical therapist and acupuncturist and all that I had tried with no success with helping with my own problems. Mm-hmm. But I finally decided to go see him, and I walked in, and there was this man who was the most distinguished man I've ever met. His intellectualism was beyond anything that I could describe. His vocabulary was beyond anything I could describe. And he just said, well, get on the table. I'll see what I can do for him. And then I started asking questions, because immediately when he put his hands on me, I could feel this flow of energy through my body. And I could feel this happening. And I would start asking him questions about it, the very first session. And I was very enamored of what he did, because for the first time in years, I had total 100% pain relief.
Wow.
It was beyond amazing. So I would ask him all these questions, and he would indulge me to a certain extent with them. But it wasn't very long at all till I begged him to teach me. And he told me, no, he can't teach me, because I didn't have the background. Mm-hmm. And so my thoughts from what he said was, well, I was not a physician. Dr. Graef was a neurologist, mm-hmm. a neurosurgeon, in fact. So I thought he was saying that I didn't have the background in neurology in order to learn his neuro-energetic methodology, which was actually he called it Taoism. Mm-hmm. He didn't say Taoist medicine. He didn't say this and that. It was just Taoism.
Just Taoism.
And of course, if you study here in the West, we look at initially at a lot of the books on Taoist stuff, and we get to thinking that's the totality of what the Taoists brought. But really, a lot of these hidden medicine techniques, the Taoists were men of knowledge. They were seekers. So a lot of these hidden medicine techniques were brought about from and kept within the Taoist circles. But so anyway, he did this, but he would, every time I go see him, he would show me some exercises. He didn't even call it Qigong. He said, these are some exercises I want you to do. And I said, okay, well, I'll do them. Okay. So I started doing them. And well, make a long story short, this went on for 2 years. And about every week I would go say, hey, Doc, how about teaching me this stuff? Oh, no, son, I'm sorry. You don't have the background. Mm-hmm. And then one day I do ask him again. And he says, of course I'm going to teach you. So the deal was I had to do Qigong in order to raise my vibration, mm-hmm. in order to perform the Taoist medicine techniques he was doing. So, which was wild in itself,
So he gave you these exercises to do, and after a certain point, I guess he could see that you progressed enough where you could kind of start digging deeper into this.
Well, it wasn't only start digging deeper. He required me to go open up a clinic.
Oh.
And, here I was, my background's electrical engineering, mm-hmm. Acoustics, and at the time I was designing computer-aided design workstations and marketing them for a living. And he says, well, I want you to go open a clinic and practice this. I said, I don't know the first thing about that. He said, well, I'm going to show you. And it was just a few months, and I just took it on faith and did so. And I did what he said he taught me, and both the result rate was beyond phenomenal. And it was just a small period of time before I had more business than I could. Let me put it this way: I had enough business I could quit my other job and do this full time, and mm-hmm. that's what I did.
Wow! And where was this? Where were you living?
I was living near Jackson,
Mississippi. Okay. Wow. And what about Dr. Wang? How did you come to know him? Not Dr. Wang, not Master Wang.
Master Wang, he was a doctor. He had his own hospital. He ran.
That's right.
100-bed hospital. Well, it's interesting because of my work in the clinic. I was having all these results, but I guess at some point in one's life they worry about recognition. Mm-hmm. And at the time I was thinking, well, here I'm having all these results, but people call these other people doctor and PhD this and that. They're in the field. And I was working as a massage therapist and was actually grandfathered in the Mississippi massage therapy laws. Mm-hmm. So I decided I wanted some recognition. So I actually applied to go to physical therapy school. And it was real interesting that I met this Lakota medicine man just weeks before I was going to be put in a situation where it was kind of no turning back mm-hmm. with this. And he did a ceremony with me. And in the middle of the ceremony, he just pauses and looks at me and asks me, why do I wish to go backwards? I said, what do you mean? My plans are, to do this. I'm going to go to school. I'm going to get the recognition I deserve to be able to pursue this career in this path of I was specializing in pain elimination. And he says, oh, you will meet someone that you've interacted with before in 2 weeks. And you will, you won't want to go backwards. You'll go forwards. Well, medicine men in their ways are kind of strange, and you got to take them with a grain of salt, right?
Right.
So, okay, so I actually I pondered that for about 3 days, and then I met a guy whose wife's uncle knew this renowned in China man who practiced this thing called Qigong. And I just felt so drawn. He said he was going to go over there. And so I didn't have any money. And I went ahead and put a trip to China on my credit card and canceled my school reservations, dropped out of that.
Sorry to interrupt, but
went to China.
At this point, you didn't know that what you were doing with Dr. Graef was Qigong, that's what it was called?
Not really. I just thought it was Taoism. That's what he called it.
Okay.
And it was. It was Taoist practices.
Okay.
And really the word Qigong is thrown about a lot. It's an umbrella term, so
right.
Yeah, it did qualify for that. But what I was really learning was Neigong. And I didn't really realize that.
And the difference for those who may not know that between Qigong and Neigong?
Neigong is the internal style of development of energetics. Of the word alchemy is used, but it's the method, our Taoist method of reuniting heaven and earth and man, our humanity. Humanity's involvement are intertwining with heaven and earth. And so there's a lot of body and energetic changes that occur to get to that point. But no, I didn't really realize what it was that Master Wang did. I just knew I wanted to go meet him.
Okay.
And it was real interesting. I got off the train, and it just like was walking into a brick wall. And I was still quite a ways from him, but oh my gosh, I mean, a literal brick wall of energy. Bam! Just like that. And I said, whoa, so I go up and meet him, and he says, so good to see you again, my friend. Which of course blew my mind, but I instantly recognized him just like he instantly recognized me.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so it was it was destiny. That's what I said earlier about we follow these things, these promptings that lead us to find our destiny. So this was my destiny to learn with him, and I did. And he was an amazing man. I've never met anyone near his power level, but also his gentleness and desire to help humanity. He was always helping others. So it was a prime example to look up to. He ran a 100-bed hospital and had 12 Qigong doctors and 2 other doctors who, the translation was X-ray vision girls. That's not what they call themselves, but an out translation, because what would happen, a patient would come into the hospital, they sign him in, and then the X-ray vision girls would observe. They would tell the treating doctor, oh, okay, he has sick chi here and here and here. He's got a pinched nerve here. He's got a pulled muscle right here, etc. And the Qigong doctor would work on him until the X-ray vision girl, I keep using that word, but it's I think people that hear this may get the wrong idea. This is the ability to see inside people's bodies And depending on who one is and where they start out, any particular person that learns Qigong may get to that point, especially if they study the medical Qigong. So that's what these girls were doing. They were able to actually sense and see the energy in people's bodies. So this division of labor of seeing and then treating was very good because, see, it takes energy to see, and it takes energy to treat.
Right.
So by having a division of labor, they optimized the guy that was doing the actual treatment. I say guy, there was girls and guys, right? Mm-hmm. So, but the doctor that was doing the actual treatment, his energy was optimized for his day, and then the girls didn't do any projection; they just saw.
Right.
So their main talent was the seeing, and this was how it worked. And they saw everything: car wrecks, brain tumors. One of my first patients at the hospital was a little girl with a brain tumor who had an operation, and it was post surgery for reducing the inflammation from the surgery and from the tumor itself. So it was not limited to any particular thing, but it was all energy. Everything was energy. It wasn't acupuncture, it wasn't herbs, it wasn't Western medicine. It was strictly a hospital of energy.
Wow.
And I think that's what makes what I learned. It's just different when you look at the medical aspect versus just simply practicing Qigong for health and awareness, which is talked about. I think that when one actually learns to manipulate Qi, their growth in the other aspect is multiplied by thousands of times. Mm-hmm. It's just like exercising a muscle, okay? If you doing a Qigong exercise and you're doing it for yourself and you're moving energy in the body and you're raising the vibration rate of the energy body itself, that's great. That is an amazing thing. But when you start actually manipulating that Qi to help someone else, you have to reach an entire different level. And I'm sure you've seen that in our classes yourself.
And with myself, it kind of gives you a heightened sense of focus and a heightened sense of responsibility where you're not just there, meditating for your own growth, which, if it works, it works. If it doesn't do anything, whatever, you're just wasted 30 minutes sitting quietly. It's not a big deal. But when you're actually trying to help someone and reduce their pain or injury, there's a responsibility with that makes you kind of step up your game.
It really does. And then the act of doing it, of practicing it, of helping others, it like I said, it's just like going to a gym in terms of muscle activation, because we're developing a different aspect of our totality, and it's a part that humanity has vastly neglected. And even now, I'm sure you hear people, anytime that energy manipulation is mentioned, they say, "Oh, there's no such thing," they blah, blah, blah. Well, gee, tell that to the thousands of people who have gotten help from those involved in the clinical practices, in the hospital practices.
Oh, that's all just placebo effect.
Well, I of course, I'm sure you've heard this as well. Is people will say, "Well, that's mental. You just convinced the person." Mm-hmm. Well, wait a minute. It works on dogs, and cats, and goats, and horses. They have no belief. Yeah. So it's not a belief system. It's an actual manipulation of energetics, mm-hmm. and it works very, very well. Master Wang did ask me to teach this in the West, and I actually had no desire to do that. I mean, I was only going to better my clinical practice, to expand my horizon of being able to help people. And so it was it was a big challenge for me to go from thinking in terms of just our clinical practice to teaching others how to do this.
Mm-hmm.
But since he asked me to do it, I have pursued that.
Before we jump into that, I wanted to go back to the hospital for one thing. I was curious as to what kind of people would choose to go there. Is it mostly like, with a lot of cancer stuff, like you try all the traditional stuff and it fails you, and then you start looking for woo-woo stuff? Is that generally what would happen? You would kind of see hopeless cases?
I think it was a little more open, especially in this area. In the city that Master Wang lived, he was very famous in that city and in that region. He was well known throughout the region. And he became well known because of his success rate.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think people were more open to that. But in general, like I say, you're right. And I know I found that in my clinic practice. I was the very last person that they would come to instead of the first. They would try the chiropractors and the acupuncture, and of course before that they go to all the Western medicine people. And so generally I think this kind of practice, we end up with cases that failures from other systems that each has its contribution, but this is different. It approaches things from a different perspective. So I think in general you could say the hospital was just in that manner, because we did see a lot of car wreck victims, but like stroke patients is Master Wang worked on stroke patients.
Mm-hmm.
And it was my first. Somewhere I had a video of this, and I think I've lost it now. But there was a stroke patient that was brought in, and my very first observation of him treating a stroke patient. This guy was paralyzed on his right side, and they set him down in a chair, took him out of the wheelchair, and propped him up in a chair. And he was hanging on with one arm on the chair. Master Wang sits off about 20 feet from him and starts projecting qi, and the paralyzed limbs start flailing, like exercise. Like he was exercising. He does that for about 20 minutes, and then this guy gets up and shuffles out, not in his wheelchair. He actually walks. It wasn't an instantaneous healing, but it was beyond incredible, beyond amazing, and most anybody that hears this is not going to believe it. It's just the clinical Qigong has so much to offer. And I think in terms of world medicine, I think of let's take everything that works and put it together in a single system and utilize it.
Yeah.
But it's a hard road. I've always referred to this as futures medicine today.
Mm-hmm.
And I still firmly believe that, even though I've been saying it for years and years and years, that this is futures medicine and it is available today, but admittedly from only a small percentage of practitioners. As you saw, like in our little group, there was, I don't know, there's less than 30 people in that class. It's amazing in one way that there's that many who could actually do this clinical Qigong. That's pretty amazing. But then another way of looking at it is it's like, oh my gosh, I wish that it could spread further out there so that people would become aware of the enormity of its efficacy and practical approach.
Yeah, because the innate ability, I assume, lies inside anyone who's human, and they could be able, if this was more well known, anyone could unlock it, at least to, like you always talk about, you don't have to be necessarily, high level world famous master, but you could always use this to treat someone in your family or your close circle of friends.
I firmly believe in the family healer I mean, what family doesn't need? What family doesn't have kids that fall down and hurt themselves, or husband or wife injured at work or while doing some kind of task? I mean, what family doesn't need it? It's like, yeah, it should be everywhere. This should be widespread and available. And I think one of the problems with it is it's just almost too fantastical for people to, in general, to believe. But I have seen a much more growing awareness over the years, and the efficacy speaks for itself, really.
Aside from doing something like, clinical studies, case studies, have you seen any kind of experiments with this kind of energy where you could, I maybe have seen a couple of videos here and there, but I'm not sure what to make of them. Like, as far as measuring qi, measuring the effects with instruments, with technology, have you ever been involved?
Well, there's several problems. There's several problems with that. Yeah, I've done some experiments, but I wouldn't call them studies. I did one sleep lab experiment where I was wired up. They run sleep lab. They run all these sensors all over your body, and it was real interesting. This was a study, and we only had, it wasn't a study like I said, but it's an experiment where we only had just a few minutes to do it because the supervisor had walked out, and so I did Qigong standing up for 3 minutes, and inside that 3 minutes, the technician that was monitoring said I went through the first 3 stages of sleep, and the curve was going steadily downwards at that 3 minutes.
Like you went,
but that's all we had.
You went like right down into what is it, delta waves?
Yeah, the first 3 stages, but the curve was headed downwards, and this was me standing up, doing standing Neigong. So I always talk about my classes. We have to stop the world, shut down and it's a dampening out of the brain waves so that one can attune to this natural energetics.
Which is what we talked about earlier.
It's really everything.
It's kind of more difficult to do when you're constantly surrounded and bombarded by a ton of modern day input. That makes it even harder to do that.
That's true, and so I think the training that we've done in less populated areas and in the mountains and the ocean, there's different qi vibrations there that we're dealing with. But I think this helps people initially to be able to. I mean, one of the problems with this is that if a person starts putting doubt in their mind, well, that brainwave that I'm talking about dampening down goes in blue. You just got this sine wave that goes up and down, and that doubt itself hinders. So a person has to become confident in themselves, and so that is easier done in a nature environment. And then after that, a person, of course, can do it with noise. It's just you learn to dampen that out.
And then on the other hand, having this set of tools when you are living in a noisy, kind of hectic environment is just invaluable. And I've seen that in my own life where me and maybe a group of whatever people I'm working with are exposed to the same set of stresses, and it ends up throwing them out of whack sometimes quite a bit, where all I need to do at the end of the day is sit for 20 minutes and do stillness movement, and I'm kind of good to go.
Absolutely, and that's the amazing aspect of the umbrella term Qigong and the Neigong. It is the personal benefits that we get out is beyond compare. It does help us deal with life. You woke up one morning, took a little pill called life. Well, life has its ups and downs and intricate transactions that we have and interactions with others and events. And if we have the ability to stay calm in any situation, that's beyond compare, because calmness is what's lacking for the most part in our society.
Yeah.
And, I talk about in the classes all the time that, one of Master Wang's 3 things in order for you to develop is calmness. And so we have to be able to stay calm in any situation. And that's where the self-practice is invaluable in terms of life.
Yeah. So, okay, so you go back to the States and start teaching. How did that go initially, and how did that evolve?
It was very it was very tough. The area I was in, one, it was the Bible Belt.
That's right.
And so there were a lot of rigid thinking, I guess, as you would call it. It was interesting that later on I had, persons from various different religions and belief systems that, I found that really, they said, well, does this conflict with my belief system? Nope, it doesn't conflict, because I can assure you that any truth that was truth in your system before you started practicing is only enhanced. And that's what I found, is that it works for people of any belief in all walks of life, because whatever you think is truth, if it is truth, it remains truth and is actually enhanced. If it's illusion, it tends to drop to the wayside.
Yeah. So,
yeah, it can affect people in terms of them recognizing their own illusions, of course, but it doesn't. It's for everyone. It doesn't matter what walk of life. You can use this if you're a painter, if you're a bricklayer. You don't have to be a healer, a doctor, a therapist. You can use this in all walks of life. If you're a salesperson, you can use it out on the street. You see somebody that's having a bad day, just use it in your voice to project that calmness, and you can just watch their eyes change. So it's a help to humanity to do the practice, because you affect everybody you meet in a positive manner, of helping them to realize their own inner self and their own tie-in to light and heaven, their own destiny. What I think people, start searching because they don't know what we're supposed to be doing, what their destiny, and we all get caught up in different aspects of our life, and that applies to everyone. But if we could just keep maintaining and try to, the Taoists talk about Wu Wei, and you read, I'll go on to some of the forums, and you'll just see page after page after page posted about this, and to me, it's like, oh, they're trying to make something that's so simple, so complicated, because it's not complicated. It's simply not inputting a mental into the equation, but simply following the natural pathway of energetics, of the flow of energy, the harmony of energy.
Right.
And the quantum physicists tell us that everything is energy, right? So it is. Every interaction is an energy interaction. Every event is an energy event. So simply being able to walk in that energy, and I call it dancing in the Wu Wei, because to me it's an intricate dance. Doesn't mean we won't make a mistake and walk off the dance floor. Of course we will. We're human. Humanity makes mistakes. But if we can just simply get back on that dance floor and follow that, and that harmony, it makes such a difference in our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And the trick there really is to learn to be sensitive to that energy and to feel it, because I have that in my own practice sometimes. If I'm in a low energy state and I'm doing the practice and I'm just kind of going through the motion sometimes, my mind tends to wander. I'll start thinking about things and I'm going through the motions versus times where I'm better prepared or just in a better state, and I can actually feel the chi flow. Like you don't have to try. I don't have to. My mind is out of the equation, like you said. And like if you're feeling it, if you're feeling the energy, you don't have to think about it. You don't have to try and describe in words what it is. You just kind of go with it and follow where it takes you.
Absolutely, and that's the path that we follow, and I think it's a great path of awareness, because it's really interesting that once a person assumes responsibility for helping others and does this practice, this dancing in the Wu way helps us to find that which we as humanity are lacking, is this ability to simply move in harmony with the natural flow of energetics.
Right.
Was there anything else in particular that you wanted to ask?
Maybe wanted to touch on, you mentioned working with sick chi, and is that a concept that people in traditional Chinese medicine are familiar with, or not so much?
Well, I guess it depends on what you study and where you study, but most of the medical Qigong that I've come across does have this as a concept, and it's even talked about in acupuncture, although it's not as practically realized in the TCM circles. But yes, we're taught to actually feel it, sense it, see it. As a person practices the Neigong methods, they eventually get where they see this sick chi. It's very real. One can look at it as like in terms of an injury. It's where the energy stagnates at an injury site. Mm-hmm. So you could look at it like as a energy stagnation, but it actually goes further than that. It's almost like the same thing as a sepsis in a wound. Mm-hmm. That as it stagnates, it actually accumulates and gets worse, because if we get to an injury initially when we're doing the clinical Qigong, the sick Qi might look like grayish in color when it comes out of a person, but when we project or manipulate the Qi, after an injury's been there a while, then this sick Qi becomes like a dark black cloud that leaves the person's body. So it's something we have to learn to deal with. And it's pretty much, you remove the sick Qi, then you've given, you can make it analogous to Western concept. You're flooding the area with blood, and you're flooding the area with oxygen, and you're reducing inflammation and all that. But in terms of energetics, it's basically, if you remove the sick Qi, the person's going to feel better.
Yeah. And one of the important things about what you in your teaching your students is learn to protect yourself and shield yourself, because this energy can jump from your client to you if you're not careful.
I've seen several cases of systems of quote energy healing that did not take the sick Qi into account, and it does accumulate and can result in a person's ill health. If they do this continuously, they may not feel it the first time they project to somebody, but if they do it in clinic day in and day out, eventually it will take its toll. Mm-hmm. So we do teach how to deal with this energy, how to shield from it, and then eventually how to transmute it into pure light, which takes a lot of time and effort to reach that stage. But it is very important to learn to deal with it. And I think any energy system or quote energy healing that doesn't take it into account are missing a large part of the picture.
Right. Well, very cool. I guess we could probably wrap up here. Well, the internet is still being kind to us. So just to wrap up, what do you want people to know about your system, your school, and where can they find out more about you and get involved if they want to learn some of this stuff?
My website is QigongAmerica.com, and that's QIGONG America.com. We do workshops throughout the year. We do have a distance workshop coming up at the end of January. It's not announced on the website yet, but will be soon. In Lomax, we'll start the 1st of January for that class. And then we'll have workshops throughout the year. I highly encourage you, if anything I've said resonates with a person, that they don't put it off. Don't say, well, this is something I might learn later. If you feel drawn to it, then that person should actually do their best to make a workshop. And usually those people that are drawn to it, once they attend a workshop, and it becomes very real. It's not what I say. It's not about what I say. It's what becomes real to them. And I often say, don't believe a word I say, my friend. Just practice and ride the wind. Because if you do the practice, all the truths will become self-evident. So it's not a belief about what I say. It's what a person can do for themselves. So any type of resonation with that is what I'm saying. Attend a workshop. I do have DVDs for the movements. These movements are great. A person does not have to attend the workshop to learn the movements. They're right there on the DVD, and you practice that. And again, if that feels something like you saying, whoa, wow, this is pretty cool, well, then attend a workshop and get into it further and learn further. We have several of the students that are teaching the movements throughout the United States now, and so contact me. Everybody should contact me, and I'll be glad to refer them to people in their area, if such exists, to learn the system.
Perfect. Awesome. Yeah. DVDs would be a great place to start, and like you said, maybe if you feel drawn to it, go from there. Well, awesome talking to you today, Michael.
Great talking with you, Paul. Thanks for having me on your show. I hope that this gives people a better perspective of the higher level energetics of clinical Qigong and Neigong. It's a little bit different than what one might have read about it, but it's very real. It works very well. We have students all over the world that's practicing this in clinic and with just amazing result rates.
That's right. Okay. So I'll let you, sounds like your dog may be hungry.
I think so.
So thanks for doing this. Thanks for connecting up kind of last minute. I really enjoyed it.
All right. Well, thank you. And hopefully this will bring some awareness of this amazing stuff to people.
Yep. I hope so too.
All right, man.
All right.
Take care.
Take care and have a happy Thanksgiving.
You too.
When the sun rises.